Walker and Lynn True. So I'll just open it up with a couple basic questions to get it going, and then maybe we'll have some a chance to get a response from y'all and some questions from you. So first of all, you guys based in New York? Yeah. Okay. And what got you involved with this group of people in the first place? What gave you the idea to do this?
We had been on a trip in 2006, which was a year before we filmed this. We had been traveling around Tibet with a group of researchers and scholars from the University of Virginia and a Tibetan NGO called Machik, and we were just, it was a totally separate project. But on that trip, we met this young guy named Sering Parlo, who was a local Tibetan who was interested in film and filmmaking and really hoping to start his own NGO that would encourage film and filmmaking in Tibet by local Tibetans. And Sering Parlo was, you know, we were all the same age, and we just really got along and started talking about things we might want to do together. And so a year later, Nelson and I returned to Tibet with our equipment, and just the idea of doing some kind of film about the nomad community over there. Parlo grew up as a nomad, so he basically just took us back to his hometown area, and that's where we shot the film. But it was really open-ended. We didn't have a plan or, you know, big agenda. Locho is Parlo's cousin, so we met him really just when Locho arrived at the roadside with his brother Zongwo and all of their yaks and horses to help us move our gear out to Pasture, because it was a 6-hour horseback ride to get to the nomad encampment. So we just had this team of yaks with, you know, saddlebags and all of our stuff for 3 months, you know, food, clothes, you know, medicine, you know, everything we thought we might need for camping out for 3 months straight without access to town.
Yeah. Wow. So what part of what was your roles in making the film?
Well, I mean, it's just it was the two of us, and it was Sering Parlo out there in the pasture. So, you know, Nelson does most of our camera work. Parlo had a camera too. You know, we charged all of our batteries with solar panels because of the lack of electricity, but we did bring a small gas generator with us because we did bring our laptops out there, and we just figured it would be a good thing to have. You know, I do all the editing, so I just know that in these projects where you're shooting hundreds of hours of footage, I was trying to at least just keep up and keep things organized. So we did use laptops a couple hours a day. But, you know, yeah, so, I mean, yeah, and Parlo conducted the interviews. You know, we don't speak any Tibetan or especially the nomadic dialect. So, yeah, Nelson and I would kind of talk through questions and themes we wanted to ask Locho Nyama, and then Parlo would kind of use it as sort of a starting point for a conversation. But inevitably that conversation would, you know, veer off in other directions, and new things would come up that we didn't anticipate. And, you know, then again, of course, we weren't even, you know, translating everything really formally out there. You know, Parlo would summarize the interview for us or what was going on with the family. But I mean, the translation process back in New York was like a complete nightmare. And so we didn't really know the full extent of what had really been spoken of in detail until years later. Literally, like the translation and subtitling process, I never want to do that again. It took forever.
Wow. So you did.
Like surprised where like that's what he said?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think it's interesting to me. I mean, it was frustrating at the time, but I think ultimately it was interesting putting the film together when we really couldn't follow up with anything. Like, what you see is what you get. We didn't, you know, again, I would have loved to have been able to follow up with certain things, but we just kept the cameras rolling, and then, you know, kind of amassed all this footage of what they talked about and what they did, and then we just had to find a way to put it together later with we couldn't fudge anything. I mean, there was nothing we could do but use what we had. So, yeah, it was an interesting process.
To me, what really stands out about this compared to most documentaries, even, I mean, you have the extreme reality show kind of stuff that's so scripted that it's basically fiction, is that this is just so far away from that you just sort of just threw yourself into this, and even if you didn't understand what was being said, you must have just in yourselves absorbed this way of life for this time period. It must have had, you know, some sort of lasting effect on you as well, I would think, in this experience, I guess.
Yeah, no, it was definitely an amazing experience, and just spending 3 months out there with the family was, is totally life changing in terms of the way that, I can't remember actually who said it, but it was an anthropologist that basically said, people sort of go out into the field expecting to learn a lot about other people, but in reality you actually learn more about yourself. And I think, spending time out there and coming back, it certainly made me, and I know Lynn as well, just sort of question a lot of the sort of the ways in which we're controlling the environment around us. When we're hot, we put on the AC, and when we're cold, we put on the heat. And it's an instance where people's whole patterns of life are dictated by the environment, whereas here we tend to change the environment around us. So it just sort of became hyper aware of the way that we were consuming things, and that we were sort of that we've been moved away from the primary processes of sort of either growing or creating our own food. We buy our food in supermarkets. So it was just a real sort of a real wake-up call to a lot of these things we sort of just take for granted.
Has it actually changed the way in which is there anything in your life you could say, well, this is because of my summer in Tibet?
Yeah, I think definitely, I even before going to Tibet, I always would like recycle, and and we would compost and do stuff like that. But it definitely has created just a much more sort of mindfulness about things in general. I found that I was much more attentive to like leaving lights on and things like that. But yeah, I can't say that there's anything direct. Like, I'm not spreading manure in the morning and using that to cook my food or anything like that. But yeah.
So you went out there with a kind of, is there a question?
Yeah, there are a couple questions.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Well, there was a great line that where they're talking about how they wish it was summer all the time, but if there were no seasons, we would learn how to endure them. That was really beautiful. And I was going to ask you guys, like, what's the worst thing that you
So the question is, like, in all that time, what was the worst thing that they had to endure while they were filming with the changing of the weather and everything else?
I think I know Nelson's answer, but
Yeah, it's different for both of us, I think. But yeah, it's a great question. You can answer first, and then I'll.
I honestly don't remember anything that really stands out as being the most difficult. It's like, like I was just telling Alan earlier, to get out there was a really long trip. And so for me, we were just so excited and crossing our fingers that we would get there and it would work. Flying all the way to China, you're in a car for 3 days, going up into the mountains, ascending to 15,000 feet over these really rocky, crazy mountain passes. And then you finally get to the county seat town where you see them go shopping. And from there, we had to get on horses and go 6 hours, further into the mountains. So, once you're there, you're kind of just like, this is where, nothing's hard or easy. Like, this is where we're going to be living, intense for 3 months. So it didn't feel like a situation, it just seemed like a situation where you had to go with the flow. And that was actually a really, I thought, beautiful opportunity. I don't know. I've camped a lot, but not for 3 months straight. And, we weren't even, going back into town for, like, breaks or showers or whatever. Like, I think that was really important for Locho and Yama, too, who just saw us just living out there with them, in a consistent, dedicated way. We weren't just popping in on the weekends and whatever. So, yeah, I don't remember anything being particularly hard. It's cold, and I definitely missed my showers, and I missed having a place to go to the bathroom that wasn't just in a field of yaks and things like that. But, those seem just like, small inconveniences ultimately. And then I think that we really just did feel lucky. We felt like, they were opening up their home to us, and it was really beautiful.
Yeah, but for me, the big challenge was the horses.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Nelson's too big for
I'm too
their
big
horses.
the horses there are really small, so my feet wouldn't fit in the stirrups, and we were like carrying a lot of equipment. So, and I don't know how to ride horses to begin with, so I was getting thrown off the horses, and it's a long ride, and you're riding in like sleet and rain, and I ended up getting blisters on my butt. It was just like that was definitely a challenge, but well worth it for the experience of being out there.
At what point did you start to accumulate support for the project? Was it more before you went, or did you get the footage first and then you found support? Or?
Yeah. So the initial trip out there, we actually did a few different projects, and Lynn and I also started an organization called the Com Film Project, which this film was sort of made under the umbrella of, and the Com Film Project is an association of American and Tibetan filmmakers. We've been doing a lot of participatory video work in Tibet, and then also a little bit in Bhutan as well. But in any case, the initial trip over there, we were supported by the Shelley and Donald Rubin Foundation to
the Rubin Museum in 17th Street in Manhattan, in Tibet, Himalayan art.
Yeah, so they're, in any case, they supported us to go over and make a series of participatory video projects, which you can see on our website. We went into different local communities and facilitated sort of these workshops with people who had never made films before and don't really have access to camera equipment. So we went over and did that, and then when we sort of tacked the shoot on to that time period, because once we got over there out in the pasture, it's actually, you aren't spending any money, it's actually quite cheap. And then we came back and sort of cut a very short, a short piece that actually showed at the Media That Matters film festival here in the city, and sort of use that as a springboard to get more funding. And it's a lot like a marathon. You sort of get pieces of money in over long, sort of over the 3-year process it took to make the film. So
yeah, we were constantly fundraising. So we had the money basically that we raised for the participatory videos, bought our plane tickets and some other things. So that paid for the shoot essentially for 3 months. But we didn't get any salary. So I mean, once we got back to New York, and obviously like living in New York, you have to pay your rent and all these other things. And so yeah, we just started applying for grants immediately, and yeah, it took a long time. Again, there was just no way we couldn't hire translators. I mean, that was essentials. And we had this team. We had, team like up to 8 people at our office, and our office is like the size of this, like little seating area right here. And we just had this team basically like working in their little stations. Because the nomadic dialect is so particular, it took us so long to find anyone who would even understand it. Out of the Tibet, I mean, there's a big Tibetan community, as you may know, in Queens here, and I feel like, called everyone, and no one could understand it. It's just not a commonly understood dialect. And so we finally found like 3 people who could understand it, but they didn't speak very good English. So we had to pair them with a Tibetan friend who shared some other common Tibetan language, who spoke better English. And so they would sit at these stations we set up with the raw footage and headphones and watch together, and the person that could understand the nomadic dialect would then chat with the Tibetan friend who spoke better English, and that person would then input English subtitles, which were again not perfect either, very sort of rough English subtitles. So yeah, paying for that whole process was kind of our priority for a good 2 years.
I wanted to ask about the family size quota and how that actually could work with nomadic families that didn't seem to have much access to medical treatment or family planning services.
Yeah. So the quota is as you see in the film. Basically, there's a quota for children in nomadic families. It's three children. But in the rest of China, or in sort of mainland China, it's actually 1 child. If some families actually don't regard the quota, and they pay a fine or a fee when they have another child. I don't know how much the fee is, but in any case, most families do actually adhere to the quota. But in regard to the to medical services, as you see, it's the nearest hospital is 6 hours away, and the services that Yama isn't even going there herself. He's bringing sort of a cup of her urine there to be tested. So the facilities are really inadequate. Actually, we had heard that a doctor was supposed to come by. So there was sort of a traveling doctor who would come and visit the various tents over the summer, but he never showed up while we were there. So it really is a big issue, and I think that's one of the biggest challenges facing the nomad community, is that a lot of the the basic services such as healthcare and education. Those things are based in towns, and it makes it very difficult for these families to have access to those things. And in some ways, that's even very much the crux of sort of the Chinese argument for settling the nomads is that they see settlement as a way of really helping the nomads develop and bringing these services to them. But it does actually have very very significant ramifications for their lives.
Anybody else have anything? Lucas?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I just was curious if anybody felt particularly drawn to any part of the film where you could really relate to what they were going through. I guess I was struck by, and I've been struck by this in my travels, my own travels, how differently they lived, and yet how similar their experiences were, and just a human experience. So I was wondering if there was anything that you guys particularly responded to.
I was going to mention it was interesting at the end when they were talking about the summer pasture and how it was going to be encroached upon new subdivisions or developments. Do you know any more about that, or just, I know at the end you had a postscript, but...
Yeah, I mean, actually, a few new developments. Lynn and I are actually on next Friday going back, and hopefully we'll have a chance to spend some time with Lochonyama, so we'll be able to see it for ourselves. But at this point, there's a road that's been built that goes all the way to Fall Pasture. So where Yama is, where they are at the end of the film, there's actually a road to that area right now. It hasn't gone all the way into Summer Pasture yet, which is still several hours away from that pasture. But also there's cell phone service is improving in the area. So Locho now owns a cell phone and uses it. I mean, they aren't, again, the service hasn't reached Summer Pasture yet, but it's sort of crawling there. So there have been actually some very significant changes even in the short time since we finished filming, and it'll definitely be interesting to sort of see that when we go back.
Did you learn any of the language when you were there?
Yeah. I mean, we learned, like, it's interesting.
Some words.
Yeah, well, we learned a lot of very specific nomad vocabulary. So a lot, like the different types of yaks we know. A lot of the, because
18 words for it.
Yeah, so they're very specific.
Yeah, it's like baby yak, 2-year-old yak that was born in the summer, yak with a brown spot on its face. I don't know.
Yeah,
there's like a ton of.
Yeah, they're very very specific words for each characteristic, whether they have like a brown patch on their face or different types of horns. So we picked up that a lot of the different sort of nomadic items and stuff like that. Those were actually the easiest things for us to pick up. But the language is actually quite challenging, and we actually before leaving tried to learn tried to learn Tibetan, and actually tried to learn Tibetan specifically from that region. But when we got out to the pasture, we actually found that the family spoke a completely different dialect than even the sort of the general language that's spoken there is Kamke, but they speak a nomadic dialect of Kamke, and they're also on the border of an area called Amdo, where there's another language called Amdoke. So their language actually is has a lot of different influences and the dialect is just very specific. So even when we tried to learn it before leaving, we got there and it was just starting from ground zero again. So. Yeah, I mean, it is something that I wish, over time we hope to learn Tibetan, because we still are continuing to work there, but it is just a very challenging language.
So what's next for the two of you?
Well, like Nelson said, we're leaving on Friday to go back to the area and hopefully see Lochonyama and get an update on their life. They have another baby since we last saw them, so they have their maximum 2 kids now. We also work in the Congo, so we were in the Congo for 2.5 months. We just got back in June. We were teaching and developing maybe a new film there. The film we made before Summer Pasture took place in the Congo, so we still have a lot of friends and relationships there. And I mean, there's no big reason why we didn't really pick the Congo and Tibet. That was just sort of how it happened. But you know, we're very close to those areas now, and so we actually also, you guys know there's a cinema in Harlem called the Maisels Cinema. Albert Maisels and his foundation started. So we actually work very closely with them, and so we actually program their Tibetan film series and their Congolese film series every year. So our Congo series comes up in October, so we're pretty busy starting to organize that. And then I don't know after that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we've the film is screened in a lot of different festivals all over the world, actually, and it's also Lo Chonyama have seen the film. It's been screened in the community, screened for actually for sort of the local leaders, and then for small groups in the community. It's obviously a difficult place to hold public screenings, but it's shown in Beijing and shown in Chengdu and shown in other cities in China as well. And it will actually be on PBS on Independent Lens. I think May 10th, 2012 is the air date. Yeah, but in any case, in 2012 it will be on Independent Lens. So it's actually been screening in a wide variety of settings. We were in the process of actually developing you mentioned you were a teacher. We're actually in the process of developing a sort of an educational guide for the film. We really hope that, I guess a couple different things that people can take from the film. One, we hope it actually just opens, sparks people's curiosity about about the larger situation in Tibet and sort of the changes that are taking place there. So in the education component, we will have sort of more sections about history and about environmental changes, and so we hope that actually the film essentially just opens the door on sort of self-exploration of the situation there. But on an individual level, I think Lucas mentioned that that in many ways that you've had a chance to spend time with this family who's in many ways our lives are extraordinarily different from the lives that we live here. But the idea is hopefully that you'll come away with an understanding of the way they live, and also a feeling of kinship with them, just seeing that they face some of the same challenges that we face here. And even though oftentimes when you see images of nomads, there's something, this seems so foreign. We just want people to actually feel a sense of connection, and maybe have just a better understanding of the way people live there.
Great. So we got a show coming in here at 4 o'clock, so we got to wrap it up. But thanks a lot for coming out. Thank you for coming out. And I can speak for myself that we really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming out. We appreciate it.